What's going on, everybody? How you doing? And welcome to another one of Lord PeteyTV Mythic Pluses and what to do about them this week for our affixes. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about our present affixes this week, and I'm pretty sure is this week 9? Are we up to week 9 already? I can't believe it's already. Yep, it's week 9. Crazy. So anyway, so week 9 is going to be fortified storming and bursting. Please, first of all, make sure you hit that subscribe button here. We have lots of videos that go out almost every single day. If not here, we also have videos that are coming out on Gaming Fire. So please make sure you check out those. We have lots of videos talking about, what to do with dungeons, how we operate with things, and so on and so forth. So please check them out. I think it's pretty awesome and pretty cool. So the first thing I'm going to talk to, and I usually end up doing voiceover for a lot of the stuff. So anyway, as always, first of all, thank you so much for coming in and doing that. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what fortified storming and bursting is going to do and what they are, how they're going to affect you, and what we're going to do with that. So, first thing we're going to talk about is fortified, which means non-boss enemies are going to have more health and they're going to deal more damage. And then on top of that, we're going to have our our storming. Uh, Storming means that tornadoes are going to spawn around the enemies and they're going to spin around, hit around the people in the room, and then bursting. So what's going to end up happening is non-boss enemies, when they die, they're going to explode and they're going to produce damage, and they're going to stack over time and then they'll deteriorate. So this week is going to be a very, very interesting week in my personal opinion, and I think it's going to be very, very heavy on the healers. Now, we're going to talk about specifically about those dungeons that we're going to be going through and what that means for everybody else. So, all right, the first thing we're going to talk about is Waycrest Manor. So, in Waycrest Manor, what that means is that you're going to have to really, really be careful because there's a lot of non-boss enemies in Waycrest Manor. In there, you're going to have to be careful of the stormings because you're not going to really have much room to move because of the stormings of the hallways and then the bursting on top of that. So you're going to have those two initial problems that you're going to find throughout that whole entire dungeon. So you have to really, really be careful. So eventually, because of the bursting and because of everything else, it's going to cause a lot of problems throughout that whole entire dungeon. All right, and then what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about Blackrook Hold. Blackrook Hold is definitely one of the. It's very similar to Waycrest Manor, as you have lots of hallways and you're going to have lots of less movement around throughout the whole entire dungeon. You have to be really, really careful of that. So be aware of it as you're moving throughout the room, and be very, very careful as you're going and taking care of things. Now, um, the larger pack rooms, that we usually end up pulling in there, take a moment to think about pulling them a little smaller. I will say that places like where you have, I think they're called I want to call them Dementors, but they're not that. They're the guys going towards the third boss, the ones that will end up sicking the bats at you. Those big guys are the ones that are, when you kill them, are going to cause the bursting, not the little guys. So you can use that and pull accordingly, but be careful because it is the fortified. You are going to be taking more damage from that, so be very, very careful and thoughtful of that. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is Throne of the Tides. Throne of the Tides, it has a lot of really, really heavy hitting mobs throughout the whole entire dungeon because of fortified. So be really careful when you're taking on that bursting and the storming. For instance, that last hallway going on to that last boss, that's going to be really, really difficult to do because you're going to have a lot of mobs, which is going to cause a lot of storming, but also killing those bigger mobs, for instance, the aqua throwers and things like that. Those guys are also going to cause more of your, more your burstings that are going to happen while you're going through. Be very, very careful of that. Be careful of the mobs, that do the crushing depths and things like that. You're gonna have a lot of hard hitting mobs, and very, very careful there. Everbloom, there's lots of mobs there, but you have a lot of space. So you can kind of deal with the storming accordingly by moving your mobs, but the mobs are going to hit really, really hard. So the thing about Everbloom is that you can really pull large packs of groups there that are going to allow you to speed through the dungeon. But this week, be really, really careful about pulling those large, large groups of mobs. Your tanks are going to take more damage because of it, and also because of the bursting when they're going to die. It's going to cause more problems, so you have to be really, really careful of that. Now, I would say one of the harder things you have to be aware of in that dungeon is still the bosses, too. The bosses are still not nice to deal with, and they really have a lot of health, especially that last one. Be really, really well, not self-conscious, but like be really conscious of those pulls while you're going through them. Okay. Now, Dark Heart Thicket, I personally feel like has some of the more annoying bosses there, and that you have to still be careful of. For instance, Iron Oak, you got to be careful of. You got to be careful of the first bosses. His shred and so on and so forth. And uh, be careful when you're running through all of that because that is going to produce problems throughout the whole entire dungeon if for there. The pulls when you're going through that also, be aware when you're pulling through with Dark Heart Thicket, you do have a great deal of people that are in there that are going to be a little bit harder to work with because they do take they do hit pretty hard, a lot of those packs. So when you're doing that, you're gonna have to be careful of dealing with the packs, and then you're gonna have to end up taking care of the storming, which you sometimes you don't have much room to work with, and then the bursting on top of that. So be aware of all of those combinations. All right. So a Toltazar, the thing about a Toltazar is you have that one big pull that everyone does in the beginning. So they're gonna go down, you're gonna start the dungeon, you're gonna hook left real quick, you're gonna do that pull, you lust on that pull, burn as much of that as you can, as quick as you possibly can. You jump down, you end up killing those two guys, and then usually the lust dies off. After that whole situation is done and over with, you pull Razan, you can kill him, and then you come back up, and then you can go into doing your normal rotation. The group before the first boss, you got to be really careful there because those guys are really, really going to hurt. Also, the group right before the princess or priestess, I mean, be careful of that. They're going to really, really hurt, so be careful there. The group on the bottom of the steps before the priestess, if you don't have interrupts properly working there, you are going to have problems. So be careful there. So you have all those little things throughout that whole entire dungeon. Thankfully, the bosses aren't going to be hard. Yasmin's still just going to be annoying because they're going to have a million spiders. But other than that, you're going to have no problems. You're going to kind of slide through. Now, the last one we're going to talk about is Rise and Fall, Dawn of the Infinite. So when you're dealing with Fall, because that's the first half, it's more of an interesting dungeon, that first half, because when you're pulling with that first half, the mobs aren't too bad to deal with. So you pull pretty much the first couple of packs, you burn those down. You don't have much room to move around, but it should be fine. Then you pull that next group. Some people even pull into that group and then burn it all down, which you know I don't recommend doing this week, but a lot of people do that anyway. So you end up pulling all those guys, you end up taking those guys down, and then you end up going into the first boss. The mobs around the second boss, be careful how you pull them. If you pull too much, you're just going to instantly wipe your group. It's going to cause a lot of problems and a lot of headache. Be careful and precise. The other thing is with the storming, with the knockups and the damage they're going to produce, with the bursting, don't chain pull. Keep an eye, watch what's happening, going through, then do what you got to do. That's all I can really say because you really got to be aware of it and you got to really take care of it. So be careful of that. The other thing is that the rest of the pulls in the dungeon aren't too bad. The bosses really aren't just annoying. They're just kind of normal. So kind of just the Blighted Galakron and so on and so forth. You just have to be aware of those and keep those going properly. Now, Marazon's Rise. Excuse me. Marazon's Rise. The reason why I want to talk about that is because that dungeon has some of the nastier trash in that whole dungeon. Specifically the ones where you're going to like the last boss. Those guys really cause a lot of the healers to burst with their damage. You have to really be careful of the storming and make sure you don't chain the bursting there because it will wipe your group. Those guys really, really do hurt a lot. So be careful with your interrupts. Make sure that's working and make sure you're pushing through because if you don't do that, it's going to be an insta wipe and it's going to be a lot of problems. So be very, very careful. Other than that, overall, be aware that thankfully, Fortified does not affect the bosses. Storming will affect the bosses, so you're going to get the storming on bosses. Bursting, you're not going to feel on bosses. So 2 out of 3 of those affixes are pretty much nullified. So all the bosses this week, as long as you're continuing to maintain what you normally do for damage and where you're going with everything, you should have zero issues with just burning all the bosses down and continuing through. So just take that into account and make sure you're thinking of that while you're going through, okay? As always, thank you so much for sitting here and listening to me yammer about what, our dungeons are going to look like for this week. Make sure you please hit that subscribe button here. We're on twitch.tv every single Monday through Friday. If you go there, hit that follow button. You'll see when we go live. If you enjoy our content, hit subscribe there. Make sure you go into our merch store. We've got some new merch coming up very, very shortly, and we're going to continue on from there. So thank you all so much. I greatly appreciate it. Make sure you use Lord PeteyTV at Rogue Energy Drinks and Sub2R for amazing discount codes and a lot of fun. So thanks you so much. Dream big, keep gaming. Have a great week. Good luck in your vaults. We got more videos coming throughout the whole week. Bye, everybody.